This is a Squiz podcast. We're your shortcut to being informed.
The Weekly Wrap is the week in news and what's coming up. I'm Andrew Williams, filling in for Kate Watson.
And I'm Claire Kimball.
I'm back again. Sorry if that's bad news, but I hope it's good news with my second Weekly Wrap of the year, Claire. Ready to talk DeepSeek, the plane crash in Washington and the Grammys with a local angle too.
That could never be bad news that you're on Weekly Wrap, Andrew. As well, we're going to talk about the possible caravan terror plot and, of course, inflation. That was a big story this week. We had a whole different list of items that we were going to talk about today, but a lot has happened in the back end of the week, so here we are.
Things have changed quickly, so let's get into it.
Before we get into it, this episode is brought to you by HubSpot. When all marketers do is put out fires, you burn out fast. With Breeze, HubSpot's collection of AI tools, you can get results without the stress. So marketers stay cool and your campaign results get hotter than ever. Visit hubspot.com/marketers to learn more.
Lots around this week about the Lunar New Year, and specifically that this year is the year of the wood snake.
The wood snake. And look, I could tell the joy that you had personally for diving into the intricacies. You covered off very well with Alice on the quiz today. Those born in the year of the snake are said to be wise and charming. Some examples include Taylor Swift, Oprah Winfrey, Bob Dylan. We'll talk about Bob a little bit later.
Yes.
And what it means for those born this year. So wood snakes, they're going to be people with extraordinary intelligence and keen insights, apparently.
Sounds like Squiz listeners to me. Claire, I took the liberty of doing, as you know, I'm a diligent researcher, and I took the liberty of looking up the year you were born. Am I allowed to say this? Or I just say 1974, the year of the tiger, which, funnily enough, 1986, so also the year of the tiger.
There you go.
So we're both tigers.
That's why we get along.
Exactly. It's the eye of the tiger. And so this is the description of someone in the year of the tiger.
Yep.
Those born in the year of the ferocious feline are said to exude charm, charisma, and confidence. They're protective, independent, and passionate, but also have an impulsive nature, which can make them prone to acting before they think. Does that sound familiar?
Not the last bit. I'm certainly, people in the Squiz team would say that I'm maybe a bit slow to act. Look, let's get out of astrology and into the news.
Okay, we'll move on. I hear you loud and clear. So let's move on to DeepSeek, shall we? DeepSeek, this 8-letter word that came out of nowhere, just dominated the week.
We had Annelise, our producer, calling it deep fake all week. I keep thinking of deep heat. Andrew, this is the latest kid on the AI chatbot block. That's a mouthful. And I feel like you're the person to talk about it with, because it was a feature of Squiz Today this week a couple of times, and also you pulled together the Squiz shortcut on it.
I would like to claim that I was way ahead of the curve, but probably not as much as I should have been, because I actually saw a LinkedIn post from a tech writer that I follow on the weekend. Why I was on LinkedIn on the weekend is a whole other question. But it mentioned that DeepSeek would make waves and that it would change the game. And I kind of read it and I went, I don't know what DeepSeek is. So I just...
Whatever that is,
I moved on.
Yeah.
And then they were right. It made huge amounts of headlines after trillions were wiped from US tech stocks. That was largely attributed to the emergence of DeepSeek, which basically kicked this whole story off, which has just kept going.
Yeah, so just to get a quick recce about those issues, DeepSeek is actually a Chinese AI company, and you can do lots of things with it, but it seems that most people are using it to summarise information and also to ask it questions.
There are two issues with DeepSeek's one specifically. The first is that it's cheap, and the second is that it's made in China.
Yeah, so in that shortcut you covered off as well this US-China versus China tech race. Concerns that the Chinese government can access sensitive information that are held by these apps that are owned by Chinese companies. I can hear TikTok going off in the back of people's minds because that has been in the news so much recently.
Yeah, that's been a long-running issue, particularly in the US, around Chinese data privacy. So now this problem has reared its head again with a different app, with DeepSeek. So, and it's not just for the US, it's nations like Australia that are concerned as well.
Yeah, and you were telling me in your coverage of this week, you were looking at Ed Husic, who is our science minister, that he was the first Western government official to really raise the alarm this week.
Yeah, I actually read that in the BBC. He said there remained a lot of questions over what he called data and privacy management.
Donald Trump, the President of the United States, also talked about issues that the American government has with these sorts of companies. So there is all of that. The other thing to clock is how cheaply DeepSeek has been to produce, certainly compared to ChatGPT.
Yeah, so there have been lots of numbers flying around this week in terms of DeepSeek, and one of the big numbers is $5.6 million. That's what DeepSeek says it took to train the chatbot.
When I was looking at that, just looking as we were putting our notes together for this episode, I wanted to ask you whether that should be billion, because it seems absolutely extraordinary that something like this could be produced for 5.6 million.
And people say, look, this might not be the whole investment. That's just what it took to train it. There's probably other costs included as well. But the cost of the chat GPTs of the world is multiple billions.
Yeah.
So it's still going to be much less no matter what. So that was behind this big slash in the stock market this week because US investors responded to this emergence dramatically.
Yeah, and it was that big stock market adjustment that saw it in the headlines this week. The company to really talk about and focus on is NVIDIA, which is the chip making company based in America. They are also the chips that DeepSeek used. If you need to sort of get your head around chips and all of this and how that's relevant in companies like NVIDIA, essentially this technology can only work with the infrastructure, and the infrastructure to make it are these chips. There's very few companies that actually make them. NVIDIA's been one of these sort of darlings of the stock market because it has such a unique capacity to do it as this AI boom takes off, which requires a lot of computational power and all of that. So what happened this week is that NVIDIA lost $600 billion US dollars off its valuation. It was the biggest single day loss in stock market history.
Yeah, it's a remarkable number. But things have calmed down a bit in the back end of the week, certainly as far as the market's concerned anyway. Yeah,
look, NVIDIA was looking at their share price. They're still up 100% on 12 months ago. So look, might not be as much as those who have poured their money into it might like, but they've doubled their return. So that's not too bad. Yeah. So NVIDIA's fortunes have been built on this idea that they would be required to produce their product and be able to sell their product at a really, really high price because they would need a lot of them. And what this whole DeepSeek thing has shown is that it can be done a lot cheaper. So I think you put it really well in the Squiz Today podcast. It's volume and it's also demand. So yeah, there was that big adjustment. Really interesting.
All right, let's dive into three other big news stories from the week, Claire. There's plenty to pick from. As you said, things change rapidly towards the end of the week, but we're going to start with the terror plot that was made public. New South Wales Police not very happy.
No. And that's not our surmising of the situation either. There were headlines reading, New South Wales Police not happy about the leaking of possible terror plot. This is about a caravan that was packed with power gel explosives. It was discovered in Sydney's northwestern fringe. That was on the 19th of January. This week they said that it had the potential to cause a mass casualty event with a blast zone of more than 40 metres. So when you look at the places that they were thinking about targeting, they were in some really densely populated or high traffic areas. So the accusation is that they were going to target a Jewish site like a big synagogue in Sydney CBD or the Jewish Museum, which is just off the city.
Yeah, and I heard the term power gel explosives and thought, I don't know what that is. So went and have a look. They're commonly used in the mining industry, and police also confirmed that there was no detonator with the caravan. And now I'm no explosives expert, clearly. You'll be surprised to hear that, Claire. But what I read is it's the thing you need to actually get the explosives to go off.
Yeah, when I was interviewing you for this job, explosives expert wasn't on your CV, so it's good to have that confirmed.
Yeah.
New South Wales Police also said that there was a list of Jewish people and institutions in the caravan, also a note that included the words F the Jews, and that's really the what of the story. It's also become a really big story because of the how.
Yeah, and how it became public knowledge because, as we said, New South Wales Police weren't happy with it. New South Wales Premier Chris Minns was out defending the decision not to alert the public about the caravan's discovery, which happened a couple of weeks ago. He said that if the public believe that the police or the government will issue a media release when they begin a counter-terrorism investigation, that is not going to happen.
Yeah, this one did leak, though. It was first reported by the Daily Telegraph on Wednesday night. The police commissioner is Karen Webb. What she said is that it's compromised the investigation. But the Daily Telegraph crime editor is Mark Morey. He wasn't having a bar of any of that. What he said is the criticism was really unfair. He said unfair because police were out and about knocking on doors and issuing search warrants so that it was going to become public.
Yeah.
No matter what.
Yeah, so that's the media angle and the media side of things. The other angle is about the fact that PM Anthony Albanese may not have been informed.
Yeah, so he was asked about it, of course, on Thursday and on Friday, and he declined to confirm that he wasn't informed, but reports say that he and the National Security Committee at the Federal Cabinet were briefed on Thursday morning, so after it became public, and that's despite federal authorities being involved in the investigation.
Yeah, working alongside New South Wales Police, the New South Wales Crime Commission, the Australian Federal Police, the Australian Security Intelligence Organisation, quite a few organisations involved in this, but that doesn't give the PM an automatic update, and what reports say is that those investigating were really trying to contain it so it didn't leak.
Yeah, didn't happen, and this is where it gets very political. It was a real free kick for the coalition, who have already been very critical of the Albanese government and their efforts to keep Jewish Australians safe, also to stamp down on the rise of anti-Semitism. It's not just that, though. There are reports about concerns about how resources are being used and whether there's enough resources when it comes to authorities being able to deal with this issue.
And how they're working together as well. So, you know, how the federal police and the state police and governments are working together. So we'll leave that one there for this week. There'll be much more about it in weeks to come, and move on to the crash in Washington, D.C., the airline crash.
Yeah, it's America's worst airline crash disaster in almost 25 years. 67 people died there when an American Airlines commercial jet collided with a US Army helicopter that was on a training flight. That plane was coming in from Wichita. It was set to land at Reagan Airport, which is a really big airport in America, and it's along the Potomac River. President Trump said that it wasn't the jet that was at fault, but rather the chopper had done something wrong. They're still investigating all of that.
Yeah, and when he was discussing it, Trump really went to town on his predecessors, and he pointed the finger at their diversity policies as being a factor.
Yeah, so if you saw that in the news on Friday and need that explained, how diversity policies actually link to this, here it is. So the Federal Aviation Administration, which is kind of like our CASA, it's the government department that is in charge of running the airspace. He said that organisation had a diversity push that included a focus on hiring people with severe intellectual and psychiatric disabilities. And he claimed that they can be air traffic controllers, but he also said that he hadn't seen any evidence that could be attributed to the crash to changes in hiring standards there.
Yeah, he just said a couple of his quotes were, "It just could have been," and he knows that because I have common sense. That's sort of what he offered.
Yep, common sense. And look, I'll read you a bit from the Washington Post, which sort of gets to the heart about this sort of reconciliation of Trump's views with the reporting. So what the Washington Post in their report said, within 5 minutes of asking for a moment of silence for the victims, Trump pivoted to his political agenda, notably his promises to shrink the federal workforce and eliminate diversity, equity and inclusion programs from all agencies. That's a big theme for the new administration.
It is, and so is, I guess, Trump's ability to defy what people would consider appropriate or have a sense of propriety around these moments. And before we move away from all things Trump, his new press secretary is burst onto the scene this week. Her name is Caroline Leavitt. She's the youngest press secretary at 27 in White House history.
Yeah, 27. She's a mum as well. And it's Caroline with a K.
With a K.
If you want to look her up. She made a really big splash because at her first press briefing, so if you think about this in your head, think back to West Wing, it's the one at the podium at the White House with the big oval sign behind it. She called on Axios and she called on Breitbart as the first media outlet to ask their questions. Axios is a platform that we're really big fans of. They do excellent political news.
Lots of American political
newsletters
stuff,
particularly. They're really great. Breitbart is a really, really conservative, hard-right publisher that has links to the Trump administration. That really put traditional media outlets' noses out of joint.
Yeah, because they would have been taking the first question for a long time, and change can be tough. Change can be difficult. That has been a theme of the podcast, and it's not going to stop as we move on to the Grammys. We were talking about this in our production meeting. They're America's biggest music awards. They're on Monday morning, Australian time. And the conversation turned, I guess, while we were discussing music, to Triple J's Hottest 100. And the big conversation point there is that only 29 Australian artists made it into this year's countdown. So for context, there were 52 last year and there were 59 the year before that.
Yeah, and if you're looking at those numbers and thinking, well, what's different this year, and thinking maybe people aren't as engaged with Triple J or the Hottest 100, that's absolutely not the case. There were 2.4 million people who voted in this year's countdown, and then it leads to questions about, okay, so what's actually happening? One of the factors that's been put forward as to why there might not be so much Australian music really charting at the moment or making lists like these is that there were a number of big music festivals cancelled in Australia last year. So maybe that's actually having a flow-on effect.
Yeah, and that's a place where lots of people might discover new music and new acts that they hadn't heard of before. But when you get into the data, what many are saying is it's also the way that we listen to music that has changed so dramatically. So it's become all streaming platforms like Spotify and Apple Music. They're so dominant, and according to recent data, only 10% of what Aussies listen to is actually homegrown music.
Yeah, there you go. It's an incredible number. And also when you look into social media algorithms as well, another place to discover music is actually the tracks that play behind your favourite reels or TikToks or whatever. So they're really driving, it seems, what's becoming popular more broadly and what we listen to on the streaming platforms. And that tends to favour global hits, it seems.
Yeah, and that leads us back to the Grammys, which, as we said, are on Monday morning our time. You can watch it on Channel 7 or 7 Plus. It's hosted by Trevor Noah again, the South African-American comedian who used to host The Daily Show. He's done that for a while. And if you look at the nominees for Record of the Year, I guess it gives you a sense of just how big this year was in US music particularly.
Record of the Year is the one, isn't it?
It's the one.
Yeah.
It's the Best Picture Oscar for music.
And I always get confused because there's also Best Song and there's Best Album.
Yes.
Anyway, best record is the one. That's all I know. So, look, Beyonce, Sabrina Carpenter, Charlie XCX, Billie Eilish, Taylor Swift, Post Malone. The Beatles, they're up for that prestigious award. Kendrick Lamar, also Chappell Roan. I know you're a big fan.
Huge fan of Chappell Roan and her song Good Luck Babe. And that was the song that took out the top spot in the Hottest 100. Speaking of US artists, dominating Australian polls. So it got the highest number of votes in the countdown's history. And Billie Eilish and Charlie XCX, two of the artists you mentioned, they also had 8 songs each in the countdown as well.
Yeah, there you go. A message now from HubSpot. When all your marketing team does is put out fires, you burn out fast. But with Breeze, HubSpot's suite of AI tools, you can get results without the stress. It means you can capture audience attention, access all your data in one place, and see how easy it is to get 110% more leads in just 12 months. Visit hubspot.com/marketers to learn more.
As a regular weekly wrap listener, Claire, of course, I reckon this part on what's coming up for the week ahead is incredibly useful for a lot of people, including me, of course.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
So, we try and make sure that everything that we do has this sort of utility element to it.
Try to do minimal useless things.
Yeah, exactly. Well, just stuff that's helpful.
Yeah.
Like if you're going to spend time on something, we want to make sure that you get something out of it. So we reckon with this sort of what's coming up element, to be forewarned is to be forearmed.
And look, in the interest of being forearmed and forewarned, heads up, I'm about to talk about cricket. And that's because there are 2 test matches on at the moment. The Aussie women are playing England in a test at the MCG. Now, the significance of that is they've been running the Women's Ashes. Australia won the first 3 ODIs. They won the first 3 2020. So if they win this, that is a clean sweep. They would have won every single game.
Amazing.
Which is incredible. They started very well. The last time I was on Weekly Wrap, just to sort of pat myself on the back, I talked about Alana King and how she was my favourite player, and she's a magnificent leg spinner. She has killed it in this series. She was
so good.
Fantastic in the ODIs. She took 4 wickets in the first innings of the Test match as well. She's just astonishing. And if you don't know her name, get familiar because she's incredible. On the men's side of things, they're currently playing in Sri Lanka, the first of a 2-test series. Steve Smith finally crossed 10,000 runs.
Yeah. So the big summer of Test cricket in Australia saw him land in the last test in Sydney on 9,999 runs, which was so unfair.
And apparently they had like a bunch of previous cricketers like ready to celebrate, and they had all this stuff ready to go. It was his home ground at the SCG.
I saw the package on Channel 9. Yeah. Like they spent a lot of time producing this content, and it didn't happen.
One single run. So it happened in front of far less people and probably far less viewers, unfortunately. Even though this is on Channel 7, you can watch it on 7, the Aussie-Sri Lanka Test match.
All right, that's the end of Andrew's Cricket Corner.
Cricket over.
A big story from the week that we didn't cover off just before was the latest inflation numbers. And I raise that because there's a couple of significant economic bits of data coming out this week from the Bureau of Stats. So on Monday, there's going to be the latest on retail trade, which is what we're spending at the shops, and also building approvals. And those relate to December. They're indicators of Australians' confidence in the economy. Pretty important as we turn the corner into another interest rate decision.
Yeah, absolutely. And on inflation, it's continuing to go down. It's now at its lowest level since the worst of the pandemic in early 2021. And the economy will be a theme in the news that will be hard to avoid in the coming weeks. This is going to be a big deal.
Yeah, elections coming up, of course. But when we look into next week, a big theme because federal parliament is back. So you really know the summer holidays are over when federal parliament is back. Our federal pollies are heading to Canberra. They're going to have party meetings and their usual get-togethers on Monday. On Tuesday morning, they'll continue those meetings and then parliament will start sitting. There's a big church service, also some other formalities. But yeah, 2025, here we are.
Yeah, and if Australia Day didn't sound the end of summer, then Parliament coming back definitely did. Also on Monday, Matilda superstar Sam Kerr's trial starts in London. It's set down for 3 days. Now, this is about police claims that she got in a dispute about a taxi fare after a night out in London and allegedly called a police officer a stupid white bastard.
Yeah, so that's the basis of the case. What the police say is that that's racially aggravated harassment, but Kerr has already pled not guilty. There's a lot going on for her at the moment. Just in the last couple of weeks, she's retaken to the training track. She seems to be recovering from an ACL injury that took her out for most of last year. She's also set to become a mum in 2025. Her partner, Christy Mewis, is pregnant.
Yeah, it'll be a very big year for her. Erin Patterson will be in the news this week. There's another pre-trial hearing for her case. She is the Victorian woman who is accused of killing 3 people with a poisonous mushroom spike meal, including attempting to kill her estranged husband.
Yeah, and we were talking about this case in the office this week too. There's so much interest in it. And the ABC has already even given notice in its podcast channel that when the trial kicks off, there will be a daily podcast on it.
I was a bit shocked because I saw that in very sort of like early mid-January that this was happening, and I thought, a daily podcast and you're starting now, that's I mean, I know there's people who are interested, but that's a lot of time to fill, but it doesn't start until the trial.
Which isn't until the middle of the year.
Yeah, so that would have been a lot of content.
It's a big warm-up.
But they probably won't be the only ones, I imagine.
No, certainly not, because the Herald Sun's are really interested. They've already done a podcast series on it. The Age as well in Melbourne. They've really been on it as well. So, look, just to round up the week, school holidays are over for the parts of the country that didn't go back this week. So, New South Wales, the ACT, Western Australia, good luck to them.
And Claire, we always have sort of a list of the days that are coming up. So it's World Nutella Day or it's World something day.
Croissant Day, there was one this week,
Outstanding. This week, Monday, is Doggy Date Night. Any plans?
No. I mean, Tucker is the best. Everyone knows that Tucker and me are quite the duo. I'm just happy to leave that as an American thing, I think.
I think that's fair enough. And I always look forward to this bit of the podcast. This is my favourite because I love some sweet recs, some recommendations.
You've always got good. I've grown already in the 3 to 4 months that you've been with us to rely on your recommendations. So give it to us.
So I went and saw last weekend A Complete Unknown. Now, I've been looking forward to this film for a while. This is the biopic about Bob Dylan, particularly his years between 1961, when he was just starting out, and 1965, when he went electric. That was the big Bob Dylan moment where he played electric instruments at the folk festival, the Newport Folk Festival. And it's got Timothée Chalamet starring as young Bob Dylan. It's directed by James Mangold, who's a very, very good director, and I loved it.
Okay.
So I thought it was fantastic. Not everyone has thought so.
Yeah.
But I think it's helped by the fact that every sort of 6 or 7 minutes they play a Bob Dylan song.
Got you.
It's kind of hard to go wrong if you're just playing Bob Dylan songs constantly. But Timothée Chalamet is
really good.
Extraordinary.
Okay. I know Kate's really waiting to see it, so that's good. Good news. Kate also reminded me that I haven't really passed on a recipe recommendation for quite some time.
Well, that's an oversight.
This is sort of my, not to use the pun, I guess, it's sort of been my bread and butter for a really long time. So
I'm glad you did. You know I love a pun, so I'm glad you did use the pun in the end.
So what I've got for you is some pork skewers, and it's got this sort of chimichurri sauce that goes with it. It's one that I made a couple of times over the summer break. I often go to the supermarket and I see pork fillet, and I've only got a couple in my repertoire for pork fillet, and it's great, but I can only do it sort of once every couple of months or so.
Yeah.
This has added another pork fillet recipe to my ensemble.
Your rotation.
Exactly. It's really delicious, and the chimichurri sauce that you make to go on top of it, you can use endlessly for a bunch of other things. So I over-delivered on that and had it for other things, fish particularly, and it was great. So
Great.
There's that recipe. It's from Gourmet Traveller.
We'll have a link to it in the show notes. Just some final business. First of all, Kate will be back next week. Don't worry. She's coming back. Second of all, we've got some jobs going, Claire.
Yeah, Squiz Press. So this is the place for us to tell you about the things that are going on with us.
What we're up to.
We mentioned it last week as well. We've got 3 roles that we're currently recruiting for. One is what we're calling the chief organiser. So that will be the person who helps us deliver our advertising content and also keeps a bunch of other things that we need kept in order so that we can report and do all the things that we need to do. So if that sounds like you, or if you know someone who's highly organised, we absolutely want to hear from you.
Good skill.
Absolutely right. We've got an podcast and audio sort of visual editor that we're looking for as well. Carter Quinn is someone who's been working with us for quite some time, actually. We found him through the great team at Squiz Kids and recruited him across to the big Squiz, as we call it.
Recruited.
Yeah, Carter's off to go and do some other things. We're not, going to talk about that because it's all a bit too traumatic really, but we're hiring for that role too. So if you know someone who's excellent at podcast editing and has video as a string to their skill set, that would be really terrific. Keen to hear from you. Also, we've told Squizzes about our partnership with Joe Aston as he launches his new business. It's called Rampart. Joe is, of course, Australia's probably foremost business news and finance columnist. Really excited about that collaboration. He needs an editorial assistant. They'll work between him and between the Squiz. We want someone who's sort of up and coming in their career, or someone who has a really strong interest in business and finance. Really keen to hear from you too. If you want to check out those job ads, go to thesquiz.com.au. Go to the bottom of the page, you'll find careers, and all of them are set out there.
Excellent. And quick shout out to Carter as well, who's a delightful bloke and lovely to be around and a great presence in the office. And I've enjoyed chatting about video games with him thoroughly. So good luck to him. Also, just a couple of quick reminders. There's a year ahead interview that you and Kate did with Lauren Sams in this channel. Well worth listening to. As soon as it popped up on socials, I saw people commenting going, oh, good, I was hoping this would come back.
Lauren has fast become a bit of a Squiz favourite, not just with us. We think we'd have Lauren on every week if we could. But certainly with listeners as well. She's just terrific. So, yeah, we're really great to get her insights into what this year looks like in her world.
Hope you have a relaxing one, whatever you're doing. Kate and Claire will be back next week. Thank you so much for listening.